So, we reached chapter 3 as soon as it turned 6 o'clock. That is time. Heisuke and I set off for Aizu, hoping to give chase to Sanan-san, who by this point had revealed himself as an unlikely foe to our cause. Throughout our journey, we were met with rumors of mysterious, gruesome murders. Whether or not the victims included men or women, young or old, they all shared a single thread: the gratuitous disfigurement of the abandoned bodies. At one point, we encountered one of the murdered victims ourselves, witnessing a body punctured by stab wounds and decomposed beyond recognition. Our worst fears had been realized. It seemed, and I shuddered to think how many of these poor, innocent people were forced to drink Sanan-san's blood. We were left to wonder, why had he set off on this malicious quest? Just what had he hoped to achieve? This fairy kingdom, as he described, established in the secluded northern part of the country, was all of it worth the bloodshed? After weeks of following Sanan-san's river of blood, Heisuke and I found ourselves at Aizu. Unfortunately, we were greeted with somber news. The Shinsengumi's campaign in Aizu proved fruitless. Their forces were depleted, relenting to the indomitable will of the Imperial Army, who'd taken Shirakawa Castle. So we made it all the way to Aizu. Window made a noise. The Aizu domain was ruled by Katamori Matsudaria, the Kyoto military commissioner, and I keep hearing things, who's responsible? He and the rest of the Aizu had faithfully served as allies of the Shinsengumi stretching back to their early years in Kyo. The Aizu offered us a place of safe refuge. Bleh. And it was within their cozy halls that Heisuke and I were reunited with familiar faces.
お前ら元気そうで何よりだな。途中で死んじまってるんじゃねえかってヒヤヒヤしてたんだぜ。
何言ってんだよ土方さん。羅刹の俺がそう簡単に死ぬはずねえだろ。はじめくんも島田くんも無事だったんだな。よかった。
あんたもな。
いや、お二人とも元気そうで本当に良かったです。前途洋々とはいきませんが、こういう時こそ希望を捨てずに頑張りましょう。
Everyone's enthusiasm to our arrival was a sight to behold. It was truly heartwarming. It was a truly heartwarming feeling, but Hijikata-san, I don't mean to change the subject, but on our travels, I came across a tile block that read, well, it mentioned that Kondo-san had... The words struggled to form in my mouth, and without wanting to continue, I gulped nervously. Hijikata-san, however, already seemed cued into the subject I wanted to address. His eyes thinned in melancholy.
ああ、助けられなかった。あちこち走り回って幕府のお偉いさん方に頼み込んだんだがな。
As though Hijikata confirmed what I'd hoped was simply a terrible rumor. On May 20th, Kondo-san was sentenced to death by way of decapitation upon the Itabashi execution grounds, and the demoralizing end to our once beloved leader. Although he had insisted, or supposedly begged, them to let him commit seppuku, his request was denied. For Kondo-san, who committed himself to a code of standards far exceeding others in his position, this was all but the destruction of his legacy. Soma and Nomura had originally embarked on a diplomatic mission to petition for Kondo-san's pardoning, but they have not been heard from since. All I could hope was that they too were safe.
土方さんはこれからどうするんだ？もともと近藤さんを大名にするために戦ってきたんだろう。それなのに
近藤さんに託されたものを今さら放り投げちまえるはずがねえだろう。失うものなんざもう他にねえしな。こうなったらとことん戦い続けてやるさ。
そうだよな。そうするしかねえよな。
I think our adventure is gonna end in Sendai, isn't it?
それでだな。お前らに見せておきてえものがあるんだが。
Hijikata-san let out a bitter sigh, pulling from his sleeve a thin, rolled-up piece of parchment.
こいつは仙台藩から会津藩に送られてきた書状の写しだ。
I knew it! Hijikata-san unrolled it before giving it to Heisuke and me. Its contents were rather telling, if not worrisome.
仙台藩から周辺諸藩への親書。新政府に下ることを良しとせず。
Wait, so does this mean that the resistance has no desire to make peace? They aim to fight against the imperial army alongside the Shinsengumi until the end?
まあそうだな。仙台藩は会津を含む周辺の藩と奥羽越列藩同盟を結んでる。こいつはその同盟諸藩に宛てて書かれたものだろ
う。内容はわかるけど、どうしてこれを俺たちに？
最後のところを読んでみろ。
Okay, that's ominous. What does it say?
新政府を名乗る輩に抗戦すべし。
My eyes followed the words as Heisuke read them aloud, but as he made his way to the end, he froze up. What's the matter, Heisuke? The letter shook in Heisuke's trembling hands, rattling the parchment in an unsettling sound. Suddenly, he found it hard to enunciate, struggling to say the name of the letter's author.
仙台藩藩士三男圭介。
Okay. I mean, Sanan-san is from Sendai, so God, this makes sense. Our last stop is gonna be Sendai. We're not gonna make it to Ezo. It's gonna be Sendai. What? It was Sanan-san who authored this letter? This stunning revelation knocked the wind out of both Heisuke and myself, who in this moment found no appropriate words that could convey our shock.
あの人がどうやって仙台藩に入り込んだのかはわからない。だがこうやって藩を動かすことができる立場にいるのは確かみてえだな。三男さんはもともと新選組総長だった人だ。俺たちの不始末は俺たちの手で肩をつけなきゃならない。
Well, right now my biggest priority is locating where Sen could be. So if that means somehow getting in touch with Sanan-san, that's what I must do.
手を貸してやりてえところだが、俺たちは合図の庇護を受けてる身だ。命令もねえのに勝手に動くわけにはいかねえ。新選組がこぞって仙台に入れば妙な憶測を招きかねねえからな。
As if we hadn't been deflated enough. Hijikata-san carried a limp with him as he moved about the room, an injury sustained while on the battlefield. Being immobilized by disability meant that Hijikata-san was forced to defer leadership on the front line to Saito-san, making the trip to Sendai all the more unlikely. Ah, so that means this is after Utsunomiya, so Hijikata did get an injury during that battle, alright. No luck ever seemed to find us.
なるほど。俺を呼んだ理由が分かったぜ。 土方さん、俺に仙台へ行けってんだろ。
What? There was a strong sourness to Heisuke's loaded question, enough to make my heart pound.
三男さんも俺も本当ならとっくに死んでた人間だ。だから死人は死人、羅刹は羅刹同士で潰し合ってこいって言うんだよな。
I mean, that makes the most sense. Heisuke, no! I refused to believe that Hijikata-san was as cruel as Heisuke seemed to suggest. Desperately, I glanced at Hijikata-san, hoping he would refute Heisuke's implication without a shred of doubt. Yet again, my hopes were dashed.
さすが察しがいいな。お前の言う通りだ。その命に変えても三男さんを止めてこい。いいな。
Whoa! Hijikata. Ah, shit, he's got that look. Hijikata-san! I couldn't help but scream at him. How could Hijikata-san? He possessed no idea of what Heisuke's experienced, how he nearly killed himself, defending against Sanan-san and his never-ending army of ravenous furies. Nor had he seen Heisuke's expression, as I did, after he was forced into a vicious murdering spree, coated in a cascade of blood that threatened his sanity. If only Hijikata-san knew what I had known, Hijikata-san's order would have never been a question. That's not fair! It's not fair to put the burden of stopping Sanan-san upon Heisuke's shoulders alone! What? Do you want Heisuke to die? Huh? Do you? I found myself panting, nearly out of breath as I shouted at Hijikata-san before I felt Heisuke's gentle hand rest upon my shoulder.
やめろよ、千鶴。
But Heisuke!
いいんだ。
He shot me a stern glance, and suddenly my lips zipped shut. Heisuke nodded, then turned to Hijikata-san.
どのみち三男さんには借りがあるし、俺にしかできねえ役目だってんなら引き受けるしかねえだろ。
Heisuke, whose eyes normally glowed with a doe-eyed charm, was stoic. A far cry from the man I'd grown to admire.
そんじゃ俺支度してくるから。
His hand curtly lifted itself from my shoulder. Without his weight, I suddenly felt uncomfortable. Heisuke, wait!
やめろ、雪村。一人にしてやれ。
Hijikata-san interrupted me coldly, his voice dripping with derision. I spun on my heel to face him. Hijikata-san hadn't wanted Heisuke to die either. Or at least, I hope not.
新選組本体から人数を割くわけにはいかねえ。今動けるのは表向き死んだことになってるただ一人の羅刹、平助だけなんだ。
Is that it? Is that the only reason you're sending Heisuke off?
一人で三男さんをどうにかできそうなのはあいつぐらいだからな。
On his own. He's leaving for Sendai on his own. He has to deal with his affliction on his own. And now, he must take down Sanan-san on his own. Sanan-san is the one who saved Heisuke's life during the Abano Koji incident.
他に方法があるんならそっちを取るが、それができねえ以上仕方がねえ。
Hijikata-san, do you really think Heisuke has any chance against Sanan-san? For a moment, Hijikata-san didn't respond. Surely even Hijikata-san was aware that he was potentially sending Heisuke off to an unceremonious death. Then, if Heisuke was going to be coerced into accepting a mission to his death, if it meant that, should I remain behind, I would never see him again, then I beg of you, allow me to join him.
お前を
I have a mission too, and that's to save Sen from Sun and Sun's clutches. Beyond that, I couldn't live with letting Heisuke sit off on his path alone. Ichikata-san stared blankly into my eyes, scanning me with an intense gaze that made me shiver. Without blinking, though, I stared back in return. As our battle of wills continued, a deafening silence filled the room until Hijikata-san shut his eyes, seemingly beaten by my determination, before letting out a deep sigh.
もともとお前を体内に留め置いてたのは行動さんの行方を探すためだ。今となっちゃお前をつなぎ止めておく理由もねえ。いや、もうずっと前からなかったのかもしれねえな。
So you're saying...
今まで悪かったな。お前は晴れて自由の身だ。
We're free from our shackles. After like 5 years. No, sorry, 4 years.
平助のやつが焼けっぱちにならねえよう、うまく手綱を取ってやってくれ。
Oh, thank you so much, Hijikata-san. Really, you have no idea how much this means to me. A warm relief trickled throughout every inch of my body, and I bowed and prostrate out of instinct.
礼には及ばねえさ。お前も平助も死ぬんじゃねえぞ。
Once more, I bowed in front of Hijikata-san, touching my forehead to the ground out of respect. With that, Hijikata-san nodded, and I left the room. It was unlikely that I would ever cross paths with any of the Shinsengumi men again, but even so, I had no regrets. We still have a chapter after this, and I'm like, who are we meeting first? Are we going straight to Sendai and dealing with Sun and Sun, or is that the grand finale? At the very least, were I to join Heisuke on this journey, he wouldn't have to die alone. A sobering thought, but one that brought me a strange comfort.